Point number 5. In a society based on contractual ties, what is known as the rule of law prevails. Note down, if you wish, the rule of substantive law. All human beings are equal before the law. The only acceptable equality in a society based on contractual ties is equality before the law. Equality before the law means we are all on the same level. We are equal only in one sense. We are equal from the standpoint of the law in abstract and formal terms, substantive law. Traditionally, this was called the rule of law. But over the years, I have come to the conclusion that the phrase, a state governed by the rule of law, what can I say? It's a contradiction in terms. To talk about a state governed by the rule of law is like talking about a square circle. It's like talking about hot snow, or if you will, a wanton virgin. These three expressions aren't mine. We owe them to Anthony de Jesse, a great Hungarian-born economist and philosopher who currently lives in France. In short, though such a state may be an ideal, it is an unattainable ideal. I have evolved over the years, and in the year 2000, I ceased to be a classical liberal. I ceased to believe a state governed by the rule of law was possible, and I became an anarchist. I am convinced that it is impossible. Once the state exists, it is impossible for it to be governed by the rule of law. It would be really nice if we could conceive of a square circle, but that is a contradiction in terms. In any case, this is an opinion of your professor. Make a footnote of it if you'd like. Mises, who is much more moderate, much less radical than I am, believes a state governed by the rule of law is possible and should be defended. What can I say? If it were possible, then it would certainly be a worthy goal to achieve. Traditionally, it is thought that a society based on contractual ties takes the form of a state in which the rule of law prevails. A state in which we are all equal before the law. However, if we take human nature into account, the moment an agency with a monopoly on violence is introduced, it's like mixing nitroglycerin. It's a highly volatile and dangerous, unstable explosive. Because politicians almost inevitably want to buy our votes, and a vicious cycle emerges in which we allow ourselves to be bought, and we begin to ask for subsidies. In other words, there is no state governed by the rule of law anywhere. But anyway, if the state must exist, traditionally it was said that a society based on contractual ties takes the form of a state in which the rule of law prevails, in which we are all equal before the law. Meanwhile, in a society based on hegemonic ties, the state is dictatorial. And imagine the dictator is, oh, I don't know, the best person you can imagine. The former Pope, for instance. The dictator is Pope Benedict XVI. Well, the state will be paternalistic. It's irrelevant who's in power. Everybody thinks all social problems would be solved if only we could remove the person in power and replace him or her with someone else. With whom? With our own candidate. Well, that idea is radically mistaken. People used to say, oh, what a disaster. Let's remove Zapatero and replace him with Rajoy. It makes no difference who's in power, if a society is based on hegemonic ties, on command and control. A dictatorial or paternalistic state is a state governed by regulations, a state governed by administrative law, which embodies precisely the commands of the person in power. In contrast, lies a state in which the rule of law prevails. Notwithstanding my observations on whether or not it is possible, I'm convinced it's an impossible utopia. Anyway, in a state where the rule of law prevails, we would all be equal before the law in the substantive sense. Later, we will see that there are huge differences between substantive law, which prevails in states with the rule of law, or should prevail, and formal law, which embodies mere administrative commands. Substantive law is abstract law which applies equally to everyone. For instance, the prohibition of murder, of theft, and of breach of contract. These are substantive laws. Meanwhile, the commands or regulations that govern a society based on hegemonic ties prescribe concrete actions in specific circumstances. You earn 50,000 euros, you owe this much in taxes. You earn 100,000, this much. You earn 4,000, this much. Prescriptions for pharmaceutical products must be like this or like that, and a regulation issued by the EU or authorities in Madrid states how bridges must be built. These are orders for concrete actions. They are commands, and whether they are called laws or not, they are not substantive laws. Point number 6. In a society based on contractual ties, the definition of freedom is very simple. Freedom is the absence of coercion. That is, the absence of physical violence or the threat of it. The moment there is no coercion, we can all lead our lives as we see fit, given our life circumstances, of course. If I'm not subjected to violence, I can lead my life as I please. But what I cannot say is, hey, I want a Rolls Royce, and I want a yacht, and I want to travel to the moon, and I want to be married to a Miss World, etc. So I'm frustrated and coerced by my circumstances, because my wife is fat and ugly. I don't have a car. I can't go to the moon, and I'm earning miserable wages. I'm coerced. No, you are coerced only in your warped and confused mind. Nobody is coercing you from the outside. And I repeat, that is the essential point. In a society based on contractual ties, freedom consists precisely of the absence of coercion. This allows each of us, within our own life circumstances, to live as we wish. Meanwhile, note the devious, subtle, treacherous and demeaning way the concept of freedom is redefined in a society based on hegemonic ties. In such a society, freedom is no longer understood as the absence of coercion. Instead, it is either explicitly or implicitly redefined and understood as follows. Freedom is the power to do something. I'm free if I can do something. Furthermore, this applies especially to the power of the dictator or the person in charge. And it makes no difference to me whether we're talking about an individual dictator or a dictatorship of the majority in a so-called democratic system. In a society based on hegemonic ties, we want freedom means we want the power to do whatever we feel like doing. And if it's necessary to use violence, that's okay. Because if not, we're not free. I'm not free because I don't have a grand enough house. So I'm justified in taking resources from you to get that house using violence. Notice, the power to do something. You will see how this belief pervades, is incorporated into, seeps into society without our realizing it. It corrupts us. We stop appreciating freedom as the absence of coercion, and we begin to worship it like an idol, as the power to do whatever we want in any situation. Then the essential indicator of whether there is freedom or not is no longer the existence of physical violence or the threat of physical violence. Instead, a person is free if he or she has the power to do many things. I'm not free if I can't have the car I want. Hey, what a nice car. Why don't I have a car like Professor Huerta de Soto's? Well, I'll just break a window, hotwire the car and take it. Hell, that's what a free man would do. He'd do whatever he wanted. And that hot girl? Well, it turns out she pays no attention to me. Well, I'll just threaten her with a gun and rape her. Who does she think she is? Since when can't I do whatever I want? I want to be free. No, don't laugh. I'm free. Free. Everybody sing. Well, of course. And what's more, we're constantly tempted to be conceited and to expect to be able to do whatever we want. Notice the perverse way the concept of freedom is redefined and demeaned in a society based on hegemonic ties. There, we come to understand freedom as the power to do whatever we want at any moment, and especially whatever the person in command wants, of course. That's why my candidate's being in power is so vital to my being able to do whatever I want, and that's why elections are so vital. And we all take to the streets to fight for our candidate, as if we were at a soccer game. I want my team to win, because then it will be easier for me to do whatever I want. And we forget the true traditional concept of freedom, around which a society based on contractual ties revolves, and that is the concept of the absence of coercion.